Welcome to Marsh Monsters. This is Owen, this is Ricky, and I'm Aiden. We're here at Herb Kebble Wetlands, and we'll be showing you how to catch some macroinvertebrates and how to identify them. And you'll be able to identify them by the end of this.
So macroinvertebrates are really important to our ecosystem. So they're an important step between microorganisms and larger things like fish and waterfowl and crayfish and all of the larger things kind of closer to the top of the food chain. So they're really important, and if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have an ecosystem.
I like to imagine our ecosystem like a tower of blocks. Up at the top we have like waterfowl like ducks and stuff like that. And under here we have fish and other animals that the waterfowl eat. And down here we have macroinvertebrates and microorganisms. And even though we don't think about these like too much, they're still a huge part of the environment. And if you take them out from the bottom, the whole thing will fall apart.
So what's a macroorganism versus a microorganism? So a microorganism, you can't see it with the naked eye. You need a microscope. It's a microorganism. A macroorganism is 5 millimeters down to like 1 or 2 millimeters. They're big enough you can see with the naked eye, but they're still kind of small. So what is a vertebrate versus an invertebrate? So a vertebrate, it has a spine, it has a skeletal system, it's a dog, it's a cat, it's you, it's a fish. And an invertebrate is like an ant, a beetle, a worm, a maggot, soft-bodied creatures, and creatures with exoskeletons.
We'll be showing you how to catch some macroinvertebrates. Here we have a D-net, and you can use this to scrape along the bottom of what's called the benthic layer, which is the very bottom layer of the marsh. When you're using your D-net to scrape the bottom layer, which is called the benthic layer, you need to make sure you get under a layer of rocks and then in that soil, which is where all the macroinvertebrates are hiding. This chart that we have here is very useful for identifying some macroinvertebrates that you might find in the marsh. And you guys will have one in your pack with you too. And if you look in the chart, at the top there's either shells or no shells. And this clearly has no shell. And then you keep going down if it has legs or no legs, and it has multiple legs, but only 3 pairs. So then you go down further on the chart, looking at whether it has wings or not, and it looks like it has wings on the back. So then you look here at the chart, leathery wings, there's not beetle-like wings, so you go to leathery wings. And here it looks just like a back swimmer. So there you identified it. And I'll show you another example. Over here, there's a quite large macroinvertebrate in there. And if you start back up at the chart again, you can go down. It's no shell, it does have legs, and it has more than 10 legs on it. So here Owen will show you what it looks like. And here it looks just like a crayfish. So there you identified another macroinvertebrate that you can find here in the marsh.
Hey, it's Ricky, and I'm about to teach you about some water quality. So one of the coolest ways that scientists can identify the quality of a water in a wetland is by looking at the macroinvertebrates that you find in the wetland. So up here, we have macroinvertebrates that are very intolerant of pollution. That means they can't survive in pollution. So if you're finding these in the water, it means the water quality is good. Now right under there, we have some that are moderately intolerant of pollution. So these ones do a little bit better in pollution, but they still don't prefer to live in it. So if you're finding these, the water quality might have a little bit of pollution in it, but it's still good. Now if you come down here, these ones are fairly tolerant of pollution. That means they do a lot better in pollution. So if you're finding just these and none of these up top, the water quality is most likely not good. And here at the very bottom, these ones are very tolerant of pollution. That means they thrive in pollution. So if you're finding just these ones on the bottom and none of these at the top, the water quality is probably bad. But if you look if you're finding these with just a few of these mixed in, that means water quality is still good. So I have a cool fact for you guys. So a lot of these creatures that we find in the water are actually animals that are just in the early stages of their life. Like all of you know what a frog is. And if you look in here, we have tadpoles that are actually just frogs in the early stages of their life, and they will later turn into frogs. And most of you probably also know what a dragonfly is. Dragonflies actually spend most of their life in the water as these little things called dragonfly nymphs. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at a few of the organisms that we caught. So in here, you can see we have a few small fish, and those fish are actually vertebrates because they have a spinal column and a skeletal system. We also have some tadpoles in there. Then in here, we have a crayfish, and that's actually an invertebrate because it has a hard exoskeleton and no spine. And here we have a few more macroinvertebrates. We have some back swimmers, some nymphs. We also have a few scuds in here. Alright, now we're gonna go keep exploring.
Alright, so another thing about water quality our friend Ricky just talked about, when you're looking at water quality, you can always do a chemical test and that'll tell you how the water quality is on that day, but it's really hard to tell what the water quality was like in the past, say 6 months ago. So that's what these macroinvertebrates are really good for, because you can look at what's there and what's not there, and if the populations are healthy for those things, and you can determine if there was a drastic drop in water quality 6 months ago or something. So they're really useful for that. And another really important thing is that these creatures are incredibly important. So we need to respect them. Doesn't matter how small it is, it's incredibly important. So if you are gonna go mucking around and looking for these guys, you wanna make sure you put them back where you found them. Okay. All right, and thanks for joining us.